Welcome to the Tambellini Group's Women in Technology Spotlight Series. In these interviews, we showcase the career paths, perspectives, and accomplishments of the remarkable women shaping technology in higher education today. And we're lucky enough to be joined today by Melanie Boynton, who serves as the Director of Institutional Research and Analytics at J. Sargeant Reynolds Community College. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're excited to have you here today. And let's start at the beginning. What did you want to be when you grew up and why?
Well, I never thought ever about IT. I just want to be really clear about that.
Yeah.
It certainly didn't cross my mind. IT was it was man's. It felt very much at the time, and it's still sort of that way, kind of a man's a career more for men.
Right.
Um, and what I knew I wanted to do from really early on was be in government. I know that sounds very dry, but I always wanted very much to be in government. And every time I would close my eyes and think about what do I want to do, the answer was really clear in my heart that I be in government, be in government. So
Right.
that was my North Star.
So then how did you go from having those early aspirations to your current role now working in technology and higher education?
Well, I drifted into IT accidentally.
Okay.
um, I got my bachelor's degree in public affairs from Indiana University, and then uh, for about 6 years, I did various government jobs in state, pretty much state government there in Indiana. Then I had reason to move to Virginia, and I got a job at the university, which is still, it's a branch of government. The public universities are an
Right.
extension of that, and I worked there at that university, and I had the chance to work. I got to complete my master's degree in public administration because I knew I still wanted to stay in government, and I was very fortunate to work for a great person, Dr. David Urban, who is now the dean of the business school at Middle Tennessee State. And at that point, I was just holding jobs and was in a job with him, working for him. And he noticed whenever we would have tasks that involved work on reporting or something with software, I would get kind of perked up. And he came to me and said, "Hey, you're really good at this and you're really interested in it. So I'm going to try to put things in front of you, responsibilities that involve this as much as possible." And that small step that he graciously took from me as a good leader set me down this road where I just kept getting more and more involved in projects because interestingly, many people don't want to work with IT projects. They're hard and perhaps
Mhm.
not as exciting as other things. And so when things would come up that involved data or reporting or IT stuff, I would raise my hand and say, "Hey, I'd like to work on that." And then eventually I ended up in my very first data analyst job working for the Virginia State Medicaid program. And my first entry level IT job was being a data analyst, understanding their pharmacy data so they could get more rebate money from the federal government. And then from there on, for about 10-ish years, I just kept going and would keep getting involved deeper and deeper into data and analytics. And that's in the IT umbrella. And progressed from being an entry level analyst to a senior analyst to then a manager. And now I'm the director. So it was just an incremental journey through the organizations I was in to keep going into the data field. And I loved what I did and I enjoyed it and I found I was good at it. It was obviously a lot of learning and a million and one mistakes, but that's okay. You just get up and go to the next thing and you just recover and you keep moving. You don't think about the error, you just focus on the goal.
And then how did you turn into doing this in higher education?
Well, I have always enjoyed working in higher education. And so when I saw this opening at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College, I was very impressed with their leadership. Their president, the current president, Dr. Paula Pando, was very impressive. And I wanted to lead at a director level another analytics team. And so they had this opportunity, and I was selected. And I felt very confident that the leadership they had at the college was really ready to make change and really rely more on data as part of their decision making toolkit. It is not the sole basis of how we make decisions, just like we don't decide to go to the emergency just based on our blood pressure or our temperature, but all of that information can help influence what we decide to do and make help us to make those decisions in a more sound way. And that's what data does for organizations. I think of data and reporting very much as like the the instruments that help us measure the health and the well-being of the organization. And so I knew that they were serious about that. They wanted to expand into that journey. That was very clear during the interview. And so I was very excited to join that team and to help deliver on that mission, which we've done very well in, and I'm very excited about that.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this role and what it entails. I mean, we hear so much about the importance of data and data analytics, as you've touched on, um, and we hear a lot about, especially in higher ed, we've got to use it better. And it used to be when we're talking about an IT role, we're talking about someone who's a CIO or a deputy CIO, but then we have people in similar leadership roles like you who are specifically focused on all this institutional research and data. So what is a day or a week like in your role? Can you enlighten us a little more about what you do for all those people out there who think they probably need someone like you, but are not exactly sure what it is that they'll do in that position?
Right. So the focus of my role, and I want to be clear, we're fortunate to have a good IT team at Reynolds. We have a good CTO, and they are able to tackle a lot of the hardware and desktop support needs of the organization. So making
Mhm.
sure the servers are up, you have a computer, the computer I'm on right now, like that it's all the employees have access to those tools. So and the classrooms, making sure the equipment there is working. They've put in a lot of capacity to build out the hybrid environments, hybrid virtual and in person courses, which is just fascinating, and it's really opened up more doors. We're an access institution, and these tools really open up even more doors for people to get involved and to actually get these learning opportunities, because online is often a good format for very busy people. Um, I would say that what my role specifically focuses on, and again, I have to give really a lot of credit to our president. She understood this along with the whole leadership team. They understood very clearly that they needed to take an evolutionary leap forward in data capacity if they were going to be serious about monitoring all of these different performance outcomes, particularly on the students, to really understand where were there equity gaps, or we sometimes call institutional gaps. So if we think, for example, I'm making up a number, 50% of our students should earn a degree within so many years of starting, whatever that may be, and we're at 40%, then we know we have a gap to close. But you can't know that if you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it and the data is continuously being updated through an automated process, it's difficult to know where you stand day by day, week by week. And my role specifically for this college, and would probably be similar for all colleges, is to just simply focus on data capacity. So
Okay.
trying to build the suite of tools that are going to allow the organization to monitor outcomes and performance dynamically at a click of the button. They can go into these tools and immediately see these results. We also engage in analytical uh, efforts like forecasting. We
Okay.
develop forecasts for the organization so that when they're setting enrollment goals, they're not just taking a number and saying, hey, we wish we would grow by 5% enrollment next year. Well, that's not very meaningful. And what we've been able to do with a lot of the forecasting is help them set very, very realistic targets. And then when they exceed the targets, they really know that they've moved a needle through some of their operational decisions and their policy changes. I remember the first time we did an enrollment forecast that first semester, things were kind of more or less status quo. I'm not saying there weren't some improvements going on, but and we saw that the actuals were very, very, very close to the forecast, like within a handful of students. And it really built a belief in the forecast that, like, okay, we know this is a realistic number. So if we built the forecast and we beat out, we exceeded the forecast this particular semester by I think it's 400 or 500 students. The leadership is like over the moon, because what they know is that we're pulling up out of that nosedive, perhaps as an
Yeah.
organization, and that what a realistic goal looked like, and then we beat the realistic goal, and then we update the forecast based on that performance to go to the next, to see what the next forecast is looking. And we look forward several years in the forecast. And it's very interactive. It really helps the leadership understand where things are headed, when they've moved a needle in something, whether it's addressing an institutional gap, an equity gap among our students, whether it's beating out our enrollment projections. They're able to look at that information and really trust that to trust what's happened and what they're seeing. So I like to see myself as kind of like an architect. Like, I have to build
Okay.
all of this infrastructure and build engagement and team investment with my team and with my colleagues across the college. And after all of that, I try to every day stay a little boots on the ground myself. I'm a programmer. I've learned to program over my career, and so every week I'm like, "Can I work on something?" I'll say to my team, "Give me some. I want to work on," and I'll pick something and I'll work on it a little bit, do some development, so that I feel like I'm close to the work, and that helps me understand what things are really like for my team. So I'm
Mhm.
very well synced up with the reality, and that helps me better plan and scope projects if I have a very realistic sense of this is exactly how long that task takes. This is all the resources needed to complete that task, the knowledge needed, the training needed among my team members. So, those are the things that I have to focus on that are new, because in the past, institutional research for a long time was focused on just giving numbers for federal or state reporting, iPads, things like that. They were that was kind of their gig. But now there's so much more need for the organization to have actionable, meaningful, accurate data at their fingertips. And building those analytical tools is what our team does under me, and then what my role is to lead the vision on and to make sure it happens.
Well, that's great. You got this combination of you're working at this very strategic level, but you also like to, roll your sleeves up and play around with it to see what's happening when the rubber meets the road. That's so cool.
No,
Really,
that's not necessary. I do it because if I don't get to do a little bit of the real work, there are strategic reasons I do it, but I think I would get depressed if
yeah,
I didn't get to work a little bit on real projects once in a while. So, I have to make sure my role is mostly strategic and leadership oriented, because that's what's critical. That's what I'm here for. But
right.
the team allows me a small corner where, and I say allows me because they are the backbone of all of this work, the analysts in our team, and they
Hmm.
do an incredible job. So it's 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 their work that shines, and I'm just proud to be working with them.
Well, that's a great segue into talking about what maybe something you really like about your role, a particular project. I don't know if there's been a new data tool that you've been able to introduce or some of these tangible results that you've seen. Is there something you'd like to share with us on that front?
Right. So we stood up about in just 12 months, and I'm really, really impressed with my team and really proud of them. Um, we stood up in just a year 10 different dashboards using SAS Visual Analytics, and the tools have been phenomenal.
Hmm.
And a lot of them are fed by daily data feeds from the system. So they are constantly being refreshed with the latest data. And it's been like amazing how the leadership in the organization has jumped on that and has used these tools to really monitor progress, to really evaluate policy changes, to look and see where, okay, we made an investment and we got a bump, but was it worth it, kind of thing. So it's not just that
Right.
did we get a bump, did we improve retention by 1%? And I'm not minimizing that. 1% can be very powerful, especially if you keep on that. The road up is not usually leaps, but there have been other places where I've seen we've made a policy change and the data showed like a 10 or 15% jump. Like it was phenomenal. The jump that we saw just by, and these policy changes don't come from me,
Hmm.
but our role, our office's role is to help those folks monitor those investments or those changes and try to draw some conclusion about what did that mean for the organization. Not that those changes are always causation, right? But we can, from the data and other qualitative interviewing and other efforts that they make to understand what's happening with the students and their experience, they can get to these conclusions and they feel pretty good about them, that they're solid conclusions. So um, standing up all those dashboards for the organization, particularly using the forecast, that was incredible. giving them realistic forecasts that they could rely upon to set goals that really played out as very reasonable. And then when the teams could see, the academic areas could see, okay, I beat my target by 103%, they feel really good about that because they
Right.
know that target was very tight. And if they exceeded by just a little bit, they know they've put in that effort and they have made that difference. When I initially came in, they were trying to set targets without that. And then what was tending to happen is that they would get 85, 90% of the target. Nobody felt very excited about that because they were
Right.
falling short. And, leadership is frustrated. I can't exactly set really strong, realistic targets here. And the people doing all the work felt disheartened. Hey, we did all this, we put in all this effort. And even though we maybe improved something by so many students, we didn't meet that goal, right? We didn't meet
Mm,
that target goal. So when we were able to tighten up the targets and then they would meet and maybe even exceed the goals, it builds this momentum. People get
mhm.
excited. They're the emails alone have been kind of
Yep.
fun to watch. People just getting so keyed up about, hey, this made a difference. We just had our in-service day last week at the college, and the president and the vice presidents of academic affairs and enrollment management success spoke. And they presented on so much data, even I thought it was too much. I'm over
Saying
institutional research
something.
and analytics, but they were just hitting over and over again how they were just tying things that they had done in the organization to what they felt were good measures and good indicate, and we had set up in the dashboards that they felt were meaningful in measuring that outcome and measuring that effort, and just showing all that to every employee, faculty, and staff member of the college, and to see the audience react, like
Mhm.
the applause at points, just that excitement that yes, we have moved a needle in a tangible way. So that has been, I could talk about that all day, but I have to stop. I would
No,
say that's what I'm
that's
most excited about.
it's great when you can have the numbers come alive in a way that, as you said, builds that momentum because people can see the impact they're having, whereas not just having it be like a one-off blip, but being able to correlate it to changes that they've made and everything instead of just saying, "Oh, we got lucky there." That's
Yeah.
really cool. So you're obviously on the cutting edge with implementing tools, teaching people how to actually use them effectively, which is, as we know, a whole separate battle in addition to getting them up and running. Um, if you could have this magical genie come down and answer one question for you about the future of whether it's data analytics or certain tools or the way they're used in higher education or just technology in higher ed writ large, what would you want to know?
So I would try to be very opportunistic in with my genie, and I would want to ask a single question that had very broad scope, so that the genie was forced to give me a lot of information in exchange.
I think
Um,
that's a great approach.
and my question would be, what tools and or strategies worked best in data, and specifically, what tools and or strategies in data worked best and why?
Mhm.
So, what I don't want to do is ever waste resource time.
Right.
And so I always want to deliver, I want to fire fewer errors but hit my target, right? Like that's my goal, not like 1,000 in the sky. Like I want to be, accuracy is the name of the game. So I would want that genie to tell me, this thing over here, it's not going to really work out. It's not really going to add value. It's not actually going to move the needle. Don't worry about it. Whatever that is. So that would be my request is
I
to
like
know
that.
what actually delivers results in data and analytics, and so that I don't waste time on things that sound good in theory, but do they actually deliver measurable change in the organization
Yeah, and
and for the students?
it can be hard to know when until you've been using it for a while. So I like that you're using the genie for efficiency. Um,
Yes. Efficiency
well,
genies.
you seem to obviously be a great motivator of teams and very visionary in how you apply data and get others to use it and leverage it for improvement. What would you say is one piece of great advice that you've received in your career that has helped you do all these things?
um I'm gonna cheat and give two pieces of
That's
advice
that's
because
not cheating. That's more than
they
welcome.
they've been the most powerful. So uh I heard recently this saying that fail stands for first attempt at learning. And
I
I
like
just want to
that.
I just want to emphasize that, um, especially early on, some of my most powerful moments in the field were falling down
Mhm.
and having people around me who they would always say past is past, okay, that happened, but here's what you need to do now. And that absolute, like, almost obsession with moving forward,
Mhm.
and that failure should not deter you. That you need to just but you need to be humble. So when you do fail, you need to own it, you need to be humble about it, and you need to think of it purely as an exercise in this will make me stronger. And then the second piece then comes in there on the dovetail, which is listen to what they say is why you failed and how you can do better. And I remember so many meetings with great people on the IT teams I was on, doing huge projects with millions and millions of dollars on the line, because these IT projects are very expensive and just massive sometimes. And, you know, being able to really develop that candor with your teammates, with your project manager, um, even the vendor sometimes, getting people to be really honest with you, making it feel safe for them to tell you the truth so that you can constantly be you're improving your performance all the time. And that's something you take as a mission. It is not a criticism. You are not measuring how many times you fail. You are measuring how many times you took that failure and let it push you to the next step. Let it push you to exceed and improve. And it's being absolutely vulnerable and ready for that feedback that will make you strong. Um, when I come into a new team, when I'm leading a new team like this team I'm leading now, one thing I often find, like, it's not uncommon for people to get kind of rigid and not really want to expose their weaknesses to each other, and it becomes the who's right and who knows the most game. And
Yeah.
so an exercise I've done, and I did it in this role, was when I first came in, I can program, as I mentioned, and so I would program, and I would call a team meeting, and I'd say, everybody, I'm going to put my code up on the screen and I want you all to criticize it. Tear it apart. Come on, what did I do wrong? You do that a couple of times, you put yourself up there. Hey, I can be humble. I can do this. And all of a sudden, all those barriers come down and everyone feels comfortable, because if you can lead by example and show that you're willing to listen to that feedback and react to the feedback, and that you prove that the feedback is making you stronger and better at what you're doing, then they will come right along. And then you immediately have a culture of transparency and honesty and vulnerability where everybody feels like they can share and be wrong and learn from each other. I recently was very fortunate to have one of our leaders at the college, the vice president of enrollment management and student success. And she gave me, I think, quite possibly one of the best compliments I've had in the past 10 years, which is she said to me, "Your cup is not full." And I was like, "Yes, I nailed it." Like, I have worked so hard to empty my cup. I've spent 10 years pouring water out of it so that I would actually really have that I'm not saying I'm there, but I'm working really hard to have that balance between knowing a lot and being strong and still being um open for change and ready to hear feedback. So I'm giving a long speech here, but I do think this
No,
question is
this
important. And
yeah.
that's listen, listen, listen. Um, Whether you're gathering requirements, you're getting feedback from your colleagues, you're getting feedback from your managers, people below you, especially, you need to cultivate a culture where they can tell you the truth and they feel safe with that radical candor, right? You need to be humble and own it. When you have made a mistake, do not shy away from it. Plunge into it full with your full heart. Yeah, I did that. I'm owning the fact that I
Mhm.
didn't get that done quite right. I just this week owned something with my boss that I said, I think we've succeeded in all these ways. We do an annual review in October. I thought we had succeeded really well in certain dimensions. I said, but in this one place here, I'm going to own the fact I feel I didn't deliver everything I wanted to last year. And that creates a very rewarding dialogue about how to move forward and gain more momentum and address the issue, as opposed to shying away from it and making it seem taboo to talk about it. So you got to listen to your leadership. What do they need to know and why do they need to know it? Not in an accusatory way, but really understand where they're coming from so you can build them the
Mhm.
best tools and the best resources possible. Listen to the people in the management level. What will best help them monitor progress and actually monitor outcome? Build a culture where they can be really honest with you about where your team could do better.
Mhm.
Listen to your team. Make sure that you are encouraging them to be honest with you. Go ahead and tell me I did it wrong, you know? Put your work up on the stand and say, "Hey, come on guys, show me how I could have done better."
Right.
What barriers are getting in the way for the staff, the administration? What's making them hesitate to adopt new tools? IT is very much about change management, and so
Mhm.
you have to make them feel good a lot of times about
Right.
this new thing they're doing. So how do you make it social? How do you kind of lean into that so they feel really almost excited and also comfortable? Grassroots marketing is huge. And then all this, and it's not least at all, but the students, right? So, through surveys and other ways, qualitative interviews and such, how are they viewing your organization and its policies, procedures, and practices? What do they actually think of what you're doing? And being able to position that information again in a way that, start with you, build a culture within yourself of vulnerability and openness and listening, and then hopefully that will kind of just sort of spread out around you. And if there's enough people doing that, it will eventually become the culture of the whole place. That we don't need to be siloed and closed off from each other. And hey, you stay in your lane, I stay in mine. But rather that we're really being supportive and integrated and responding to each other and helping each other with feedback, meaningful
Yeah.
feedback.
You also mentioned something very interesting here, and this comes up a lot in the conversations that I have is there can be this hesitancy to experiment because what if we don't get it right? Especially when we're talking about tools, IT tools, whether it's data analytics or other things. It's so important in higher ed, even though we think of post-secondary education as so grounded in research and labs and experimenting, then we get scared to try that when we're working in a leadership position and we're responsible for all these things. So, Melanie, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you making the time and thank you for sharing all your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.